Did.
Okay. Test. All right, cool. Hello, everyone. We're gonna get started in about 2 minutes. I'm just giving everybody another 2 minutes to jump on. Hello and welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. My name is Ryan Cavanaugh. I'm an ACM sales engineer for the Northeast region. Today we're going to be covering the basics of adding a user in ACM, as well as groups, profiles, and policies. And we're just going to kind of touch lightly on all those subjects just for the basics. For anybody who maybe is not aware or hasn't done ACM in a while, this will be a nice refresher course. So during this presentation, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. We have a couple of our other engineers on board here, so they'll be able to answer any questions that come up. And of course, at the end, we'll open everybody's mics up. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask them then as well. All right, let's jump into it. All right, so inside ACM, basically the way you assign access to everybody is through what's called roles. Now, before you set up your roles, there's two other steps you want to take, and that's to create a schedule if you're using any type of a schedule, and the other is to create access groups, and I'll show you those on the live demo. But for right now, let's focus on the roles. Now, in ACM, roles are permissions that are assigned to identities. Roles are often segregated users, card holders, workstations, and general system options. User permissions are composed of system permissions, card holder permissions, monitor permissions, and field and page permissions. So roles can be physical, basically assigned by access groups. They can be logical, which is permission-based, or in ACM it's delegations. And you can assign multiple roles to an identity. So you can have basically a user on the system who can access ACM, as well as permissions to access a door. We have a quick diagram here. So basically you have your schedules and your holidays, and then you have your doors. Both of those get tied into an access group. The access group gets tied to a role, and then the role gets tied to an identity. And if you follow that path, that's basically the common steps to adding physical access to any user. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the demo here. We're going to go over the basics of adding a user into ACM. So like I said, we're going to start with the schedules right on the under the click wheel at the top. You see I have a couple schedules here, but we'll just create one just to kind of walk you through how that's done. Now there's a couple different modes here if you look. If you're not sure what those modes do, you can always go to the help at the top of the page, and it'll break down basically what all those sections do. So you have like your green, which indicates the schedule is always active, yellow, which is scan mode, and that indicates the schedule's active and relying on the system time settings to initiate the scheduled action. Most schedules should use this setting, so we recommend the scan mode for most of the schedules. And then red is off, meaning inactive. All right, so we'll go ahead and go back and we'll go ahead and add just a schedule, and maybe we'll just do one day and just a certain amount of hours during that day. Maybe we'll do Monday. We'll call it Monday 1 to 3. And then you'll mark the time that it's active and inactive. So remember, this is military time. And we'll do 15. Let's just do a 2-hour schedule. And again, we're putting it in scan mode there at the top. Hit save. And that's our schedule. We'll go over to the access groups. And you see I have a couple already created here, but we'll go ahead and create one just for the purposes of this demo. Obviously, you can also delete any schedules that you have in there other than your master schedule, because you always need to have one schedule in the system. And we'll just call this exterior doors. We'll make it on our schedule, and we want to mark it installed at the bottom. And then we'll go ahead and hit save to save the changes. Now in ACM, you'll notice you only have a couple options, and as soon as you hit save, a lot of times another set of options will come up. That's just to make it easier for you to kind of see what information is required, and then you can populate the next set of information that you need. Now I'm just grabbing a couple different random doors, and I'll go ahead and hit save. Now if we go back into it under access, we can see it says right there, to make it nice and easy for you, that there's no identities assigned to it, and roles have to be created for this access group. So we go into our roles tab, and we're going to go ahead and create a role for this access group. And we'll just call it exterior doors. And we'll call it Monday just to make sure we know what we're talking about. Under the stop date, you want to make sure you set the time far enough out in the future. By default, it's a year from when you create the role. So typically, you don't want the role to expire in a year. So we always recommend setting it to 2037, which is as far out as Mercury will really allow. So we'll go ahead and tie our exterior door group here under our access groups and go ahead and hit save. And now we can assign this role to an identity. So I have a couple different identities in here already. And if you just go ahead and hit search, you can populate all the people who are already in the system. I'm going to go ahead and add somebody new here, just so we could see that process. I'm going to give them a last name, first name. And once again, if you look at the top, there's not a ton of options. But as soon as you hit save, it brings you to your next section where you have a bunch more tabs. So I'll go ahead and add that exterior doors role. And then we can make up a token number. The embossed number really doesn't have any bearing on what we're doing. It's the internal number that the system's really focused on. And again, you have your deactive date. I always check never expire for the badge. And as you see at the top, token was successfully created. Now we can go in and we can add a photo to the user. We can create a custom badge. I'll go ahead and add a photo. So I'm just going to grab something that I have saved on my desktop. We're going to make this the primary photo. And then we'll go ahead and hit save. Now, if you're printing badges, you can go ahead and hit the badge section. You can print out a certain badge type for them, but we're not doing that for this demonstration. If you go to the audit history, you can see all the different changes that have been applied to this user. So that's the quick breakdown of adding a user into ACM. We've done a couple other lunch and learns that really dive deep into adding a user, so you can definitely check those out on the partner portal. But next, we're going to jump into the ACM groups because grouping's kind of cool. It allows you to group hardware components, doors, inputs, outputs, as well as system components like roles and identities. So what's going to be useful for is applying identity profiles for identity batch updates. If you add in 1,000 users into the system and you realize, oh my God, I forgot to add this one door, you don't need to go into each specific user and add this door. You can do it all through a group with a batch update. You can also apply door templates to a group of doors, and you can also assign policies to overwrite hardware settings for emergency lockdowns and stuff like that, which we will demo later during this demonstration. So for right now, we're going to jump in and create a group here. So you go under roles and then groups. And so you have a couple groups created already. And obviously you can delete them on your right-hand side there. I'm going to go ahead and add a group. And once again, you'll notice there's not a whole lot of settings at the top. It's really just asking you for a name. And as soon as I name it and hit save, you'll see that I get a bunch more options at the top there. Once again, ACM just trying to make things a little easier so that you make sure you fill out everything that's required first. I'm just going to call this ID group. And here we go. We have our couple different options across the top, policies, members. We'll cover policies later, but for right now, we'll just go to members. And for this type, we'll do an identity type. You see there's a couple different options in there. You can do door, you can do input, output, and it'll give you all your options for like your Mercury board and stuff like that. And if you go to the help page, once again, you see what all these different options are and all the different options you have on that page. That's one of the better things about ACM is the help option, because it's specific to whatever page you're on at the time. So for this one, I'm just going to do an identity group, and you'll notice there's a bunch of different fields you can sort it by. So I can sort it by group. I can sort it by all different sorts of fields: last name, first name, department, division. So for this demo, I think we'll do department, and we'll go to R&D and hit search. And that'll give me all the people who are in the R&D department. So I have 3 people on my system who are considered the R&D department. And you can also further expand it if you want to add multiple things, multiple different options. There's different criteria. So if you want to sort it by issue date or first name, last name, if you have a bunch of Mikes in your R&D department, you can sort it by their last name. You can also sort it by their status, and I'll just do active. When I hit save there, or search rather, you'll notice there's no changes because all these 3 badges are currently active right now. So I'll go ahead and add these 3 people over for our RD group, and I have Bruce Banner, Tony Stark, and Jim Rhodey, or Jim Rhodes. And I'll save that. And that's our ID group. It's just those 3 members for right now. So now if I go up to identities, and if I hit search, I have all my people here. If you notice at the top there, you can also search by their group. So if I go to a different identity that wasn't included in this group, I can also add him in manually. So there, I can just throw in a couple different groups. So there's a couple different ways you can add a group to a user. Probably the easiest way is the first way, but if you have 1 or 2 stragglers that you forgot about, you can always go into their profile and add them that way. And if I clear out my search, I can search for everybody in that group. Originally there was 3 people, and now you can see there's 4 because I added this recent person. So just a couple quick ways you can add people to a group. All right, let me pull up my slide here for profiles. All right, so ACM profiles are basically a template that's used to create or modify identities. A couple of things it can be useful for is used for standardization for the way that information is added into the identity records. You can use it to create an identity using a profile template. You can use it to batch update an identity profile for multiple identities inside of a group. So think of it like this. Maybe you have a building that's under construction, and you're going to have a couple hundred contractors over the next couple weeks come in and out. And maybe you want to mark them all as a contractor, give them specific access to a certain building, and you know that all of their access is going to expire on January 1st, and you don't want them to be able to access that building after that date. Rather than populating that information each time for each specific identity, you can create a profile and assign that profile to each identity and not have to populate it each time. Now, you'll still have to add specific information if you want to add their name and stuff like that and their card number, but it saves you a lot of different steps and a lot of time that you don't need to enter all this stuff each time for each user. So let's go ahead and jump back in here. Move this out of the way and pull up ACM. All right. So under identities, you have your profiles section. So you see I don't have any created right now, so we're going to go ahead and create that during this demo. And what you'll notice is when you go to create a new identity after you have a profile, it'll automatically ask you if you want to use one of these identity profiles. So I'll go ahead and add an identity profile, and you're going to give it a name, and you see all the different information that you can enter. For just right now, I'm just going to name it, and I'll just call it we'll just call it contractor identity or ID. And you know what? I'll make all the badges active, and I'll go ahead and mark the department. I'll leave that blank, and I'll call the type contractor, and maybe I'll assign it to a specific site. I'll do north, and maybe I'll give it a building. It's the main office. Go down, and once you hit save, you see you have these options here. More options across the top and options all down the side here. And you can see at the top there you have the option for remove, add, and assign equal. Assign equal is basically if somebody has a specific role and you want to replace it with something else, that's when you would use this assign equal section. So basically if they had admin access and I wanted to take admin access away and give them super admin, I would use that field. So for our purposes, we're going to kind of jump down and just do an add right now. And we'll go ahead and add the exterior doors. And now if they had another door we wanted to remove, we could put a remove in there, but for right now, we'll just add the exterior doors. And this for this profile, if we wanted to add a certain token status, we could do that here. We could do the token expiration date. If we wanted the badge to expire after a certain amount of time, go ahead and hit 90 days. And we'll go over to our groups and the same set of rules here. You know, if you have a group that you want them to be removed from, you can remove them. If you want to add them to a group, you can add them. And assign equal means if they have a certain group, you will replace it with this group instead. So I'm not going to do anything with that. I'm just going to go back to my identities. I'll hit add an identity. And if you notice here, it immediately pops up with a new identity profile, which is contractor ID, which is the one we just created. So I can go ahead and hit OK if I want to populate all that information, and you'll see there the badge status shows active, the type is contractor, the site location is there, and the building is there. I'm going to cancel this one out, and I'll show you if you want to add a profile that's maybe not a contractor, what you could do. Hit cancel. And hit add identity. And if I wanted to just create a normal profile, I could just click the X there, and you'll see I have all the same information that I normally would where it's blank. So you still have the flexibility where you can still create a normal badge holder if you don't want to use that profile. I'll go ahead and hit cancel here. Go back in, and I will add a contractor right now. And I'll put in test and contractor for the first name. And go ahead and hit save. And you'll see here, it's now a member of the exterior doors, which is what we set up when we created the groups and the identity profile. I'll go ahead and give them a card, and I'll save that. Go back up to the top here, and under roles, go to groups, and I'll add another group. And let's call this the IT department. And you see here, we have all the icons that pop up across the top there, different tabs. You'll see under policy members, it says none because nobody's assigned to this right now. But you see there you have group, policy, members. We'll go back into members. We'll do another identity profile. And I'll grab a couple different users. Or you know what? I'll do it by department. And I think I have an IT to do an IT department. See if I have, all right, I just have one person in there. So maybe we'll add another user. Go to a different department. And we'll just pretend that somebody here from our HR is also a part of our IT department and add them to this group. So we have 2 users in the IT department now. Go ahead and hit save. Save the changes. And we'll go back in to identities. And once again, we can sort by the group or the department if we wanted to. I'm going to go ahead and sort by IT department. And you see there we have our 2 users that we just added. So I'll go into one of these users under groups. And once again, I can just remove them from that group if I wanted to, or make any changes that I need to. So if we add another identity profile here, and we'll call this access to main, let's just call it just access to gate. And this will be everybody who has access to our main gate. And we'll remove if they have any access that we don't want them to have. And I'll go ahead and add the main entrance only. And if anybody has master access, which I believe they both do, I'll go ahead and remove that from those users. Go ahead and hit save. Now, if I want to make any changes here, I can. I'm going to leave those all blank for right now. Again, if you don't make any changes, it won't push any changes out there. So by adding nothing, you're really changing nothing. So don't be afraid to leave stuff blank if you don't want to make that change. So you can see here I have the contractor ID that we created earlier and the access to gate identity profile. And we'll go ahead and if we apply this batch update to this group and hit OK. You'll see we get a notification that it's successful, and we can go back into those identities and see that now they only have main entrance only. Master access has been removed, and it's just been replaced basically with main entrance only. And next we're going to cover ACM policies. So policies set the highest priority inside of ACM. So they can be used for high priority doors as well as emergency situations like a lockdown. So it allows you to change ACM hardware configuration, doors, inputs, outputs, based on condition, schedule, or action. And we're going to jump into a quick demo here of policies. If you go to under roles and policies, you see I have a policy in there already. We're going to go ahead and add a new one. And we're just going to call this one lockdown or priority lockdown. And we'll go ahead and do it as a door policy and hit save. And you'll see, once again, I get a bunch of different tabs here. Because we're doing this as a door policy, we get the Mercury settings. And if we go down, you notice I cannot click that priority checkbox just yet. What you need to do is create a custom mode and a custom schedule. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to lock no access. And the custom schedule I'll put it on is going to be 24/7 because we want this to be available 24 hours a day. And priority, and go ahead and hit save on the bottom there. You'll see there that nothing's assigned to it right now. So if we go to our group, now we can grab one of the ones that we created earlier. And we go to policies. And I'll go ahead and add this policy. I'll remove the old one that was tied to this door and go ahead and hit save. And if I go back, you'll see there that I have one policy installed. I forgot to hit the install button here. So once I would hit that installed button, you can uninstall it and install it. And then I have another lockdown that I created. We can do this through a global action as well. So if we go here, we'll call it priority lockdown again. And we'll make the type policy install and uninstall. And we'll do this as an install. Move it over. And go ahead and hit save. And this will install that policy when we launch that global action. So if I was to hit that global action and execute, it would install that policy. Now you can also do this on a map as well. And I can show you what that looks like. So if you go under maps, under monitor, and then I'll go to my security dashboard. And this is basically a facility here, and I do have a lockdown tab at the top there. You can click that, and you'll notice all the doors that are green right now will have a red box around them for locked, no access, and I can return them to normal just as easily. Now, one thing I did want to touch base on real quick is how to do a batch destroy. So basically, this feature is not enabled under any user account by default. So if we go to the roles here, you can see under this test role account, if I go to delegations, under the delegate tab, we can see what permissions it has. So this particular one has a role that's called no door unlock. So this particular user doesn't have rights to unlock the door. So that was just one role that I created. So if I go back into the main user account, which will be my super admin, and of course you can also go to the delegate tab, and you can see there it's a member of the super admin role. So now if we go to the delegations and under super admin, you'll see that there's two items that are not enabled by default. So what you'll need to do is select identity destroy batch and move that over to the members section if you want to mass delete a bunch of different identities in the system. And that's disabled for a purpose because you don't want to accidentally click a button and disable and delete a bunch of users out of the system. So we recommend if you're going to use this feature to enable it, and then once you're done with it and you've done what you need to do, go ahead and remove that back out of the delegation so nobody makes a mistake in the future. So I'm going to go ahead and create a group here. I'll just click add group, and I'm going to call this one delete everyone. And I'll go ahead and save it. And once again, we'll get our different options across the top there. I'm going to go to members, and I'm going to do the type for identity again. And I'm going to pick a couple users that we entered in during this demonstration because I won't need them in the system going forward. So I'll select this one, and I'll go to the bottom here and grab the contractor also. So obviously, if this was a real world scenario, you could grab everybody, just hold down Shift and select the entire group, and throw everybody into this member area. But for our purposes, I'm just going to delete 2 people out of the system just to show you that this function does work and how easy it really is. So I'll go ahead and save this group. And you see there I have 2 people in this group right now. Now, if I go back to the top and go to my identity section, and I'll go ahead and do a drop down, and I'll pull up my group, which is delete everybody, and I will hit search. And it should pull up my 2 users, and they're right there. Now, if you notice, as soon as I hit that search, I had that destroy batch feature that just came up on the screen. So this was never available before, and it's only available after you enable that under the delegation. So I'm going to go ahead and click this, and it'll ask you just to make sure this is what you want to do. And yes, I want to delete these 2 users out of the system. And that's it. They're gone. Now, that could have been thousands of users just as easily. So if I go back and I'll just clear out my search field here, just hit clear search actually. And then I'll do a search, and I have everybody in the system except those 2 users that I deleted moments ago. So that's how quick and easy it can be to delete everybody out of the system. But once again, after you use that feature, we recommend going back in and removing that delegation out of your user account, just so this doesn't happen by mistake in the future. All right, so real quick, we'll kind of touch base on creating roles to manage the system. This is for anybody who you're going to enter into the system who will be in charge of, adding, deleting, modifying people from the system, making any changes that need to be made. But we'll do something that's kind of, I guess, super restrictive, so you can see that you can really narrow things down and restrict users if need be. So we'll go up to the roles and then delegations. And I have a couple created already. And as always, if you look on the right-hand side, you can delete them as necessary, other than your super admin role, which by default you can't delete, as we talked about earlier. So I think I'll do I have one that's created as no door unlock. So let me just click on that real quick. Better yet, let's create a new one from scratch. We're going to go to add delegation. And we'll go ahead and type this one in. We'll call this one and we'll call this one only unlock. And we'll go ahead and hit save. And we're just going to basically grab one item that this person can do. We'll find something good. We'll do an unlock, filter. Okay, we'll do door unlock here. That, and hit save. And so now we'll jump up to roles, and we'll add a role. And we'll call this one, let's call this, we'll just call it door unlock. And then obviously we want to change the date to 2037 as we discussed before, just so in a year from now your customer not calling you saying what's going on here. And hit save. And we'll go to the delegate tab, and we'll go ahead and select that that we just picked there. And we'll go to the identities now, and we'll assign this user with just this function. And what I'm really trying to show you here is that once you assign the user with just one function and log in with that user account, you're not able to really do anything on the system other than that one function. So if you go down here to the login, this is where you'll create the login that they'll sign in with. So I'll just call this test ID, put in a password real quick, and then we'll hit save. And then we'll go ahead and assign the role here that we just created, door unlock role, and go ahead and hit save. And you'll notice because this is just going to be a user on the system, we don't need to do anything other than assign the role. So we don't need a token or anything like that. We don't need a group. We don't need any of that extra information. So now if I log out of this user account, which I'm logged in as the super admin, and log in with that new identity that I just created, if I can remember the password I just created. And once you get back in, you can see that you don't have any permission to do any of this stuff. You can't go to any of these tabs. You can't see any information. You can't change any information. You can't delete any information because you only have that one specific selection that we picked before. So just going through all this, you can just see how narrow you can make this and how refined and how detailed you can make these roles. So there's a lot of different options there, and you can really kind of cater this to almost every need that you're going to have based on users both physically on the system and then as far as the hardware and everything else as well. So, and the big thing there is if you go to like the appliance tab and everything like that, you can't shut down the server. You can't reboot the server. So that's an important one that you want to make sure that not everybody has access to doing that because that could be a big real problem. Quick, let me just go back up here and log out and log back in. Since we have a little bit of extra time, I just want to quickly cover. We'll go back into identities real quick and just cover some of the other things we brushed over in the beginning. So I'll just go ahead and click add. I'll grab one of my profiles. Yeah, that's fine. I'll just do contractor. We'll just call them demo user. And if we scroll down, you see all the different fields, like department that we kind of touched on before. You can add a title, you know, if it's a manager, CEO, you can throw in a division there. So you can really customize this and make this specific to your site. And then obviously you have address information and email address and stuff like that if you want to throw that in there. Then you see down at the bottom you have like remote domain and all that sort of remote login stuff. That's if you're doing an Active Directory collaboration. But if you see here, there's a inactivity timer. So that's basically if you're a user on the system. So I'll just go ahead and create a user here. This basically allows you to stay logged into the system if you click indefinite, so that you don't have to keep signing in and out of the system. There's also other times on there. You can set it to an hour or whatever. I think the default is 5 or 10 minutes. And then if you go here, I'll just add them as a super admin, which is stuff we kind of touched base on before. And I'll go down and hit save. And tokens, I don't think there's really much we need to cover in here. Embossed number basically means if there's a number printed on the outside of the card that might be different from what the system is reading and you need to keep a record of it, that's where you'd put that. And that's more for record keeping than any functionality really in the system. Like I said, I always check never expire. Now, the difference between never expire for the token versus never expire for the role is the role will expire for everybody who has that role. This expires the actual card. So I don't know if I made that clear earlier, but there is a difference between the two. That's why I usually will select never expire, but you can pick a certain date. And this is where we'll add some of those groups that we created earlier. And again, we can throw a photo on this image, which we did before, but I'll go ahead and grab a photo just so you can see what it looks like under the badge section. I'll grab that same photo again, and I'll select use it as the primary, hit save. And now if you go to your badge, I have some really awful looking badges that I kind of created. This one has a barcode, so it'll actually turn your Wiegand number into a specific barcode if you know the font type. But you see there, it'll just throw that picture that's in your identity onto your badge, and then you can go ahead and hit save. If you had a badging printer hooked up, you'd be able to print it as well. I don't have one hooked up, and we're not really getting into that, but and then if you look here, you have the roles, the access group, and you can see all the different doors that this particular identity has access to. So that's a good feature. And then if you go to our audit tab, you can see all the different changes that we've made to this user over the history of this user account. So you can see all the different changes and stuff that have been made, and then we can go back. And that's basically your user. Oh, there is one thing I did want to show real quick. So go in here and just to touch base real quick on the identity profile. I don't know if you saw, but when I select identity profile, you can have multiple different identity profiles in this system. So you can see them there. That I have 3 created on that previous page, and basically that drop down will allow you to pick any of those 3 identity profiles. So it's not that you can just create one. And I wasn't sure if I made that clear earlier, and I did want to jump back and just touch base on that, just so everybody's aware that you can create multiple different identity profiles, and you can toggle between them and use different ones as need be. And of course, any page that you're on at any point, if you go up here and you forget what a certain field is for, you just go up to the help, and it's really a good tool to use when you're in ACM, because it's specific to whatever page you're on at the time. So right here, you can see the remote authentication and exactly what that does. If for some reason you're on the system, you forget what it does, you go up to the little help icon, and you can see what record modification, inactivity timer, all these different things do, and what they are and how they can affect your system. So it's a good tool. Just remember that it's always there. And it's usually the first line of defense when you're trying to troubleshoot the system. I always tell everybody to check the help, because it is very helpful. And then if we go to the top here in the gear wheel and go to system settings, and I just want to show you guys one last thing here, and then we'll open it up for questions. But if you go to the bottom here and you have this use-lose threshold here. So this is if you have thousands of employees and you want to get rid of people who haven't used their badge in 100 days, you can go ahead and put 100 days here, click the little green save button right next to it, and it'll save that change. And anybody who hasn't swiped their card, it'll automatically disable their card in the system. So that's a good feature if you're worried about people coming and going. But that's basically covering everything we wanted to cover here. So I think that pretty much sums it up. We're going to go ahead and unmute everybody. So if anybody has any questions, I don't know if there's, I'm going to go ahead and take a look, see if there's any here in the chat. But I want to thank everybody for joining us first and foremost as we're kind of wrapping up here. But if anybody's got any questions, now's the time. We'll definitely try to answer those for you. I see a couple that were in the chat. Looks like somebody already got to them. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. And have a great weekend and enjoy the rest of your Friday.